Hello everybody and welcome to a special episode where we paint a Victoria Miniatures APC. This is actually a brand new release. In fact, at the time of this painting it technically doesn't even have a name, although Kangaroo is the name that's being bandied about. And you can see it's roughly camera sized here. Very close to a camera size, and obviously it has a lot of the same properties that a camera does. You got your home mounted weapon and everything else. There's a few different, and you got your back door here too. But you still see some of these World War II-esque British Matilda with the mud chutes here, your mud fenders, that sort of thing. And I saw this and I just said Crusader turret, so I found myself some of my pictures of, as you see here in the upper right and lower left hand corners, of a Crusader that I had done. What we're going to do is match that as closely as possible. We're not going to do any of the desert camo, but we'll see what we can do. There's got the same amount of rivets here, just like we have on the Crusader. And if you're interested in the primer that was used, we're looking at Badger Steino Res. Started out with some of the darker browns and then ended up with this over the top of that, just as kind of a dusting. Now you could brush this on too if you don't have an airbrush. I just happen to have one, so that worked out pretty well. We're going to use a series of Sacred Weapon paints here. Now we're not going to do a lot of rust on this because it is supposed to be more of a desert vehicle, so you have to find other ways of getting that weathering. And if you've seen any of my other tutorials, you know that with desert stuff we tend to focus on more like sun bleaching and chipping and scratching, that sort of thing. So we'll see some of these in action. We also have some Reaper stuff here, mostly in the form of these two. We got brown liner, sepia liner. And we'll use the Maiden Flash and this white here to lighten some things up. Maiden Flesh is sort of important because while I used oils on the Crusader there, I did use a color very similar to this, a super light flesh tone color. That helped us get some of that sun bleaching effect. As far as the brushes go, it's the usual number 8 round craft brush that you've seen, but this is another set that I've shown in some of the other videos. Basically, it's a larger version of the number 8 round. I think I've even got a 10. So this is 12. Yeah, there's a 10. So I'll use some of these bigger ones, especially in the initial stages. And just like our craft brushes that are smaller, big ones do the same thing. And they basically become a long, extended filbert brush. It's kind of important here, given the size of this and how we're going to want to cover large areas of this all at once. Of course, as usual, we've got our sponges out here, makeup sponges. I'm going to take on a slightly different role because as we need to do some chipping of things here, we're going to try something here. Watch what happens. We're just going to tear that. And now you see we have some of these random, here I'll tear it again. So you have a lot of these random shapes here. Here, let's cover that up a bit. There, now you can see it. This is what we'll use to do some of that chipping, paint wearing away. I know there's what are some of the methods? Well, obviously the MIG ammo chipping fluid, but then you have the hairspray method. That's not really stuff that I can do here on camera. So we're going to have to do this kind of the old-fashioned way, and we're just going to use that sponge along these cornered surfaces. We also have some of these different darker colors here. The Engine Grime, they're called weathering paints, but we're going to use them as both weathering and as regular paints. Speaking of which, let's get these paints out on the palette, and we're going to do some of our initial glazing and shading. Let's get things started with the turret here and just kind of ease our ways into this. Just have a few things out on the palette here. We got the brown liner, sepia liner. I think that's the Engine Grime. And I think that is the caked dirt. It is old mud. Sorry about that. And like we've done on some of our previous efforts, we're going to turn this stuff into a rather soupy little glaze slash wash. Here we even get into some of that engine grime and our old mud. So we're going to have a lot of this available, and we're going to start up at the top. Now I want to have that sort of desert look to this, so we're going to get going with a little bit of the sepia liner. And you say, oh my gosh, that's really, really dark. Well, remember, we've got those sponges. Those are going to be really important for negotiating this stuff, and we're going to be mixing a lot of things together. Now you notice that I'm sort of sticking to a certain portion of the turret as we mix a little bit of the old mud in there. So yeah, incorporate a little bit more. So I like to have all these washes or all these colors out there so I can work with them. So we have this handy little area here that separates the two. Let's just use that now. Let's get a little bit darker here as we get down on the underside of the turret here. Get a little shadow in there. And so we've got our sponges. And what we want to do is, see how even there, I don't know if you can see that, just that little bit of emotion. Look at that. See how it also starts to create some streaking just by default? That's pretty nifty. And see if we do this. We do this, and we don't need it to be perfectly smooth, because remember, we're trying to do some weathering on this vehicle. Now we also have these type of sponges that can get in there and do even a little bit more. So you see we're treating the oil, or the acrylics, almost like they're oils. Almost as if they were oils. So let's hit our two gun mounts here. Now these are probably going to be done with metallics later on. We're just going to darken those up for right now. Just in advance. We're going to let that do its thing. And now we're going to move on to the other side. The turret, because we had this handy, convenient little thing that was just basically creating a difference between the two halves of the turret. Notice I'm staying away from the cupola for the moment. Now, for those of you that maybe haven't seen some of the vehicle painting things before, I've got especially a bunch of Facebook Live episodes on this. You can look those up. But also on my YouTube channel, I know I've got the Charbie painting tutorial. So that basically is doing a lot of the exact same things we're doing here. Only difference is that's in gray. It's a Dunkelgrau vehicle because it's a captured German Flammpanzer. So see, we've got all of this sitting right in here. What we're going to do, we're going to take it like so. Like that. And let's say I need to create a little bit of a difference here. I can always grab a scissors and cut that. But for now, we're just going to see, we can do both. We can do this motion, dab away. Here, let's just like that. Remember, we've got our other sponges right here. We're not trying to do anything final here. We are trying to leave a little bit of color around the rivets and such things. Now, one of the other things I was trying to do, you can, I think, see now there's a color difference here. So this almost acted like a filter. It's already tinted things a little more towards tan, where that was at, and that's the sepia liner. Good portion of that is the sepia liner. Because the primer, I didn't want that to get too yellowish sand. I wanted to do as much as I could with these glazes and washes as possible. So we've got a few periscopes and viewports I see. I'm going to get in here with some of the brown liner, just make that darker, and I always have fresh sponges on hand. Again, they're real cheap. I just tend to get these off of Amazon by the hundreds. And there's your turret, and let's see what kind of a difference. So it's not just darker, it's also more towards the yellow. So what we're going to do is set this thing aside, get it out of the way. And now we've got some more, we have something a little more complex here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off here with the tracks. And that's where I'm going to get into the engine grime here, because we're going to throw some dust into the tracks. Not going to go so much with the tracks rust. Now, for those of you not quite so familiar with the vehicle painting, it's not just a MIG ammo product. I think just about every company has their version of tracks rust, and it's very basically dark brown mixed with a fair amount of a little bit of rust color, so sort of a burnt sienna type color. Now, I'm not going to completely abandon the sepia liner here, but we're mostly focusing on that combination of engine grime and the brown liner. Makes it darker, yes. That's why it's kind of hard for you to even see what the heck's going on in here. But this is metal after all, and probably it's not going to be painted. It's going to be just bare metal, so we're sort of killing two birds with one stone here. So I'll flip this over. I'm not really going to do a whole bunch down here on the inside because it's already really dark from the primer. And as I said, I must have had about 6, 7, 8 layers of primer on here. That's what I do with all of the vehicles, because this is a big old hunk of resin here. It's heavy. It's really heavy, even with this big area cut out here to reduce that weight. So it's important to strengthen your primer by essentially providing some additional layers. Now, normally I stick the vehicle on some kind of a, like the turret, some kind of a dead paint jar or something. This thing's just too darn heavy. I wish I could have positioned on one of those. It would have made it easier for this part of the process, because you can see I'm going to run into issues hanging onto this thing because it's heavy, like I said. Here, now we're just taking some of that paint away, leaving stuff behind. Want that to be dark because we are going to be putting all that sand on there. This not going to worry about too much because that's going to make sense that there would be a fair amount of chipping going on there. Now, where I see areas that the primer is a little bit on the lighter side, I'm going to get down in there. Get down in there with some of these darker tones. And remember, my first inclination is to start thinking, okay, I don't want to lose all my shading down in there. I need to have lights down in there. But then I have to stop myself and go, wait a second, that's where the dust is supposed to be, down in those tracks. And if you lighten those up, I think even in the picture of the Crusader, you can see that dust down in the tracks. Yeah, if I really feel like I have to, second, just take this, boom, I'll go along here, take some of that away, and now my darker areas remain dark, and part that was lighter kind of goes back to being light again. I've had even finer things that I can use as far as sponges. I think they're the eyeliner sponges. Yeah, that's it. So we're now really going to get there on the sprocket, on these bogey wheels here. Now these are the typical twin bogey, almost railroad-like suspensions. I know Czech vehicles had that, and especially in the Panzer 35. But then you ended up seeing that, geez, on Italian vehicles, Hungarian vehicles, all over the place. It just reminds me so much of railroad cars. There we go. Tiny little bogey wheels slash road wheels. Not like the Christie style suspension with the much bigger wheels, and that's what you got on that Crusader there. And we're going to get right down in the, see how that area is really light? Well, now we're just going to get down in there with this darker tone. And I don't really have to worry. If something happens and see there's junk there on the glove, that transfers over to the rest of the vehicle, whatever. That's what chipping is for. And we can paint over that too. Now again, my first instinct is to do this kind of thing with the oils. I really love using the oils. But this has to dry really fast. As in, like in the next 24 hours. So that means we do it with what we got. And that's going to be the acrylics. Just about done with our tracks here. Not going to do too much more. See how much paint's coming off there. Here, let's see if we can just rip that into shape. Get down in here. See what we can remove. You can see there's some paint coming out of there again. Not worried about that. And those are good to go. There's a couple more areas of dark that we want to do something with, and that's going to be in these mud chutes here. So I'm going to turn this upside down. And I'm basically just going to get some dark color in here. Nothing real fancy, because that's something I can lighten up later. But it's really going to be lightened up with dust instead of with going in there with paint strokes and in the traditional way that you might think. So here we go. Just setting these things up for later on. And if you've watched any of those vehicle tutorials, you know that I always, well, any miniature, when you paint it, you have to essentially think of it like a little chess game where you need to think moves in advance. We're already trying to think moves in advance. I have to work within the limitations here of the space. I don't have a whole lot of space here. This is really huge. That's why the camera is backed out so far. It's as far as I can get that camera to go back. Here we go, just working our way through these elements. Like so. There, we get one more in here for you. And there's only one other truly recessed area that I see. And I've got to deal with. That's over here. It's almost like a stowage bin, something along those lines. Not sure what it is, but I'm just going to get some darker stuff in there, and we'll just leave that go. Now, we've got our exhaust over here, and yeah, I'm real tempted to do that with the chrome type stuff, because I did that, I think, on the Matilda. But here, I don't know. I'm I haven't quite decided if I'm going to do the metallic stuff there and maybe the heat stuff where it goes, I think, from blue to purple to orange, that sort of situation. I don't know yet. It really depends on what the rest of the vehicle looks like. Now, in this case, I always have to remember that I'm not doing a historical vehicle, and this is also, it is a commission thing. And this is something that I try to, for everybody, try to think, okay, how can I help out folks that maybe are doing this for a living, but maybe they're early on in their approach to it. So maybe seeing how I go about doing commission things can give you some ideas for yourself. So I think I'm going to do is, since we've got other stuff going on around here, let's get back into here. That's that old mud mixed with the sepia touch of the brown. Let's just get this back door plate going on here. So again, not going to do much with rust on this. We have to rely on the chipping and the sun bleaching, that sort of, that's going to be our weathering. We can't rely on mud spatters. This area would be a prime candidate for such things, for sure. And again, not something we can do, not in the desert. Now, in, say, the Tunisian campaign, that was hindered a lot by rain and mud, and it did really create a huge amount of problems, especially for moving around vehicles. Pretty much the same as the Rasputin in the Soviet Union during Barbarossa. So see how we're getting a little bit of, see if I only use this one section of it here and sort of isolate that, or if I use these, I start to get a hint of streaks, but they're not going to be rust streaks. There we go. And that's enough. You can see, there we go. See how that tints it a little bit darker. So what I'm also going to do here, got a pile of stuff sitting there. We don't want that. Just get rid of that. I'm going to do this top section right here. So we're just going to work now from the top down. This is interesting because turret ring, and I generally, with turret rings, make those darker. Now, of course, when I'm doing any kind of a vehicle that would be exposed to moisture, I really tend to collect a lot of rust around the turret ring just because water would accumulate there. We have to think differently here. We have to think more, well, dust would accumulate in there. Now I'm just going with water at this point, mixing it in with what's already here. Here, let's grab a little more. We're gonna stop there. You can see I alternate back and forth between the sepia liner and the old mud. And stopping here. Like I said, if this was the oil stuff, you would have plenty of time here. I could do this in a way less frenetic pace than I am right now, because I wouldn't have to worry about things drying. Again, that's why I love the oils. But as we stressed earlier on, this needs to be finished really, really, really fast and sent out really, really fast. So that dictates the materials that I can use. And if you are a commissioned painter, if you've really done this in a serious way, you know sometimes that, boy, you'd love to do something, but either what the person asks you to do and what the realities of the situation are, sometimes those are two very different things. You can see we've got a hint of shading there. Now the typical oil thing to put on is a filter. That's the thing you'll probably see the most with some of the vehicle painters. So let's move off to one of the sides here. Okay. There we go. So again, we're mixing. I have a touch of gray in there, getting this relatively liquid. And we'll try and use gravity in our favor here. So we're doing two things. We're shading it a little. That's why we can see we get into some of that gray and that shades darker. But we're also looking to tint the color. So we're essentially trying to create a tint that works a little bit like the oil filters. And what does a tint mean? And you're sort of staining the color. And I'm going to have a little brown, again, a little bit of the gray. And this is something you'll have to do is figure out, okay, how do I break this vehicle down into chunks, manageable chunks. Boom, we got that. Grab another sponge right here. Get it where you can see it. And what are we going to do? We're going to straight down, straight down, straight down. Because remember, there's nothing that says we can't go back over this with lighter colors or anything like that. We're just doing these initial glazes where we tint this. Now we have some staining now here around some of these rivets. That's the thing that I'm trying to create. So again, the sepia liner, that's your primary filter, we're going to call it that. That's the thing that's going to make it a little more towards the yellow. And see how that just disappeared? Look at how that just disappears. That's the old mud. That's where you're sort of neutralizing the filter. You're going to a more neutral color here. We're going to the gray. We don't have to forget about the brown liner. Here, let's go sepia and brown liner over here by your sprocket there. Or yeah, now this design doesn't have return rotors, so yeah, I don't have to think about that. And there we go. See, just boom, right over the top. Don't have to be gentle with it or anything, because what are we going to do? We're going to take this right down there. Again, boom. Trying to leave some of that behind. That's the balance. Yeah, how much are you going to take away here? How much do you leave behind? Well, make sure we leave some. And let's do the front plate here. So lots of stressing on the sepia liner filter element here as we are on the top section of this. I'm going to go over the whole mount too. I'm going to do it all at once. One of the things that the secret weapon paints are designed to do is something along the lines of this. So see, boom, what I just did there. Let them mix together. It's almost a watercolor type of a technique there. And we'll just draw that down. Once again, not forgetting about our brown liner. Gonna do the same thing here. Gonna get on the other side of that portion of the hull there. Just stop right there. Doesn't have to be super perfect or anything. And we're going to pretty much have to go with these type of sponges because I think I forgot my scissors, so I can't slice up those sponges. Now in the next segment, of course, when we don't have to be doing this, I'll have scissors back in here. We can play around with that, but it's funny, I used to use these sponges all the time, and it wasn't until I ran out of them that I started to use the scissors and cut up my other sponges, just because I didn't have sponges to work with. So here's our bottom section here. We've got our towing clamps, or towing hooks, or eye clamps there. Oh, just boom. I'm just going to use my fingers on that. No big deal. Here, let's go back to our de facto filter color, and where are we going to work next? Let's work on these sections over here. And we're just going to stop there. So there's a lot of, clearly, these are probably the constituent resin pieces here. So there's plenty of lines that'll help us just kind of stop, let the paint stop where this is flowing, since we're working really liquid like this. And sponge over the top this way. And you notice I tend to, on these upper surfaces, work in a more, where these tend to be going like this with the sponge, and here I tend to stipple it a little bit. That's because I'm trying to already think about, okay, guys stepping on the tank, try not to have their feet smashed in hatches as the hatches close, that sort of thing. So there. See, in here, that's where we let it go straight down. So you can see the difference there in the two splash guards, dust guards. Different things for different folks. And yeah, let's get in here the little, remember that. So there's obviously going to be a bunch of chipping all around this door. So the thing is, the darker I make those areas, then the less the chipping is going to show up. And that's your strategy right there. That's your strategic planning in advance. How much do I have to think ahead about all that chipping, scratching, everything else, which tends to show up better against lighter colors. It's one of the reasons why most people tend to use lighter color schemes on vehicles, like gray. I think there was a portion in time where I thought every single Imperial Guard vehicle was just supposed to be painted gray, as in light gray, because it showed up everything. It showed rust, because the rust was obviously a much warmer reddish tone. It showed dirt, chipping, it showed all of those fun things. So, and essentially manipulating the painting of the tank just by the color choices involved. So we're going to swipe this along here. See how much paint was moving along there. Yeah, I might even just go ahead. I got one of these things. Might even start stippling it right there. That is something when I would do with the oils, I just started stippling right away, because it was all wet paint. I could move it around any way I wanted, and if I didn't like it, I could just wipe it away. So here we go. Just got one section left that's had nothing done to it yet. There's our, again, the sepia liner, the old mud in here. Sometimes add some water to it. I think what I will also be doing is introducing some weathering powders, maybe even at earlier stages instead of just at the end for dust and that sort of thing. And it depends on what I get done with just the regular old paints. So sponge, take some of that away. And sometimes going at it with some of this sort of action, sometimes a sweeping action. Now you see why I didn't do any on this yet, because, well, I hit that a lot. But now, that's basically the last thing we got to hit with this. And from here, we're going to move on to some additional darkening around things like the rivets, a little bit of shading, and then start to work in some of our lighter colors. We're not going to call them highlights at all. There. You see, this was an oil painting thing. I'd already be doing stuff like this around the turret ring. So we're going at it, being not super gentle here. Round and round that turret ring we go. And sorry if the camera shakes a little bit, but see how in no time at all we're already starting to get an effect here. Here we can even got one of these little vents right here. You can darken that one up. And let's hit this other, hit this one right here too, just so that can dry. And we'll go back to our turret in the next segment here while all this stuff has a chance to dry. Here, let's grab one of these little sponges. Yeah. So we leave behind our dark color in there. No problem. Like so. Even now, I'm just kind of absent-mindedly having some fun on the corners of these. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but sometimes, especially with the oils, I like to just play around like that because, again, I can. See how we're just trying to take advantage of some of these little accidental things that happened here, especially along the seams. So that's the kind of thing that we're going to do next. So stay tuned for a little bit of pre-weathering and some darkening of stuff. We'll call it that. So we're going to get back to our turret here. And like I said, we're going to do some additional darks, some initial weathering. Now I also have some lighter colors out here. I do have this Handlewood, I think. It's a little more of a tan. Now we've got the Maiden Flesh out there too. But first, let's see if we can't find some of those. Remember the darks we were talking about? So now this brush it's gotten beat up a little bit. Let's grab one that's maybe a little more pristine here, a little finer point to it, and see if we can go around some of these rivets even. You don't want to make everything dark, because like I said before, we want to do chipping. We want to have some dust around the rivets too. And that's what we're going to avoid here. I'm going to avoid that temptation to get in here and do all that chipping stuff. Just trying to do is, here, let's get a little bit of that Handlewood in here. Remember how I said that weathering is not just the chipping and all that kind of stuff. It's also about sun bleaching. And what we're going to try and do is here's a little bit of wet blending that's going to happen. So that's that handle wood. See how we set up our darks around there. Now let's get it going this way. Now you can see it. Just get some of that off the brush. See how that's just sort of mixing together? Yes, we don't have oils out there, but we're still doing basically an oil painting type of concept right there. So you see how we can, here, let's get some of this off of here. We'll get some of our sepia liner, a little bit of the gray there. Let's do the same thing around some of these elements that we did on the cupola, like so, around the rivets. We go back to our handle wood here, and now we're going to let those blend together. So what are we getting? Not just as far as value goes, light and dark, it's real similar to what else is there, but you notice that color's a little different now. It has more of a yellow to it. And that's just how the secret weapon paints. They're really interesting. They are essentially designed to be used in this watercolor style way. That's why I like them. And that's why I don't just automatically say, oh man, I can't use oils, I can't do any of the things I want. Now, there is a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I wanted to will the use of oils, but yet have the advantages of the quick drying nature of the acrylics. And we're working this along here, just in between some of those rivets, and now can go right on top of those. Blammo. Same thing here. Don't want to lose the darks in that crevice there, because that's where dust is going to accumulate, and we won't see the dust if we don't have a dark enough tone there. Here we are. Now there may be portions of this that you just won't be able to see as far as me getting them on camera. So if there's an angle or whatever that I don't necessarily show, well, don't fret. It probably might come more painting areas of the hull, because, well, that's huge and it's heavy. So see how we're painting a little bit like there's streaks there, but not really emphasizing streaks too much. See how I leave a little bit of a darker streak right there behind. What have we not quite used yet? We haven't used any of the maiden flesh. We're going to start using a little bit of that. And this will be not just lightening things, but also now starting to talk about that sun bleaching element of things. Here we go. And so I don't really have much of a glacis plate there because, well, it's Crusader-like. It's not completely a Crusader, obviously. So here we go. This is where we're going to lighten some of this. Like so. And the idea is that this is maybe where the sun has bleached away some of the paint. I've seen it happen here. And this is in the city of Chicago. This is by no means a desert. But I have seen paint quite literally just blazed away by the sun. I've seen it, I talk about light fastness of paint when you've got, say, 2D art, right? Well, that's 2D art inside a building. Now take your 2D art and stick it outside where the sun can really get to it. So I'm just lighten up a few of the rivets there. We're going to work on, see, around these couple of rivets. And what that's going to do, just like when you look at the Crusader pictures on either side, what that does is it essentially gives it a little bit of a pink look, and therefore the tan just starts to look bleached and weathered. And you could mix white with the tan, but that just sort of makes it lighter. Doesn't really give it any sort of a color differential. Here, let's lighten up the cupola a bit here. And you notice I'm not trying to make this super smooth. I'm actually stippling away here, trying to find some variations. Let's do that here too. Like so. And probably what's going to happen on the main hull is when it comes to the right and left sides of the vehicle where you've got the mud chutes and everything else, just to save some time so this doesn't end up being a 4-hour video, I may just do one side, because, well, the other side's going to be done exactly the same way. So you don't necessarily need to see me repeat that process. And I'm going to wipe away a little bit of that so I can just get... I always have my other colors out there, so I can always be mixing these together. You can see how this brush just lets me scumble things. So just like what we have on our Crusader, we're starting to get that same look here. Like I said before, one is done in oils, this one done in acrylics, but the colors are going to look awful similar, real similar. Now the light here, this is another place. I might use the pearl there instead of the metallic. It's another Reaper color. It's pearl white. But we'll worry about that when we get to it. So here, let's do some streaks down this way. Let's go back in here, and I can even get that filbert sort of look to it. And here we go. We're just going to drag that down. Doing that here. See where you can pick up even some of the rivets there. There we go. Turn it around. Do some of that over here on the other side. Now as far as the markings, I'm just going to do some generalized stuff here and do some numerals. I can even maybe, well, I don't know if I'll look at the Matilda and repeat some of those markings on here. We'll just do some generic numbering. To keep this more, the imagery a little more neutral on this. We're doing the same thing on the front plate here. See, we're just dragging that down. See how the rivets stay behind. But overall, we get a little bit of a semi-streaking look, which can sound weird out of context. So again, we got the filbert brush thing going on here. Let's right over here on the underside of this turret do some of that. Same thing here. Back plate. Doing more of this. And then more here. And that was about that. We got the upper surface here. Needs a few shots of that. And we have not even tried, we haven't gone to this yet, the handle wood and the maiden flesh. And see how we're doing this? It's not a dry brush whatsoever. There's tons of paint on that brush. But we've got our filbert thing going on here. And you can see that I'm emphasizing getting the lighter paint here towards the bottom edge of the turret. And let's do some more on the other side. Here we are. And if I feel I need something to make that paint flow better, I'm just going to grab a little water. I don't use the mediums or anything like that. We used to. And I just slowly got away from that. Just use it less and less and less. Doesn't mean you can't use it yourself. You can do that if you want. You can see how this starts to gradually not just lighten up, but also starts to trend towards that more yellowish tan, something a little bit warmer. And we'll hit our hatch here on the cupola. All the while thinking, boy, I really want to have some of the dust accumulate there around those rivets, so let's not mess with those too much. So another dose of the handle wood, touch of that maiden flesh. And in we go. I'm going to try and get some of this lighter here. Doing the same thing, that sort of not stippling, but that feathered brush stroke. I'm going to do it again here. So what this does, even though when the eye looks at this and says, oh, it's a tan desert tank, when the eye looks at it a little bit closer, it's going to say, wow, there's a lot more going on there. There's grays, there's practically greens, we got all kinds of colors. But didn't have to slave away super hard to get all those transitions. It was not that difficult. So here we're going to spread out that brush again. Take away excess where I think I need to. And just draw this down. Like this. And we'll call it a day on the turret for right now, because we want to get to the main hull. I'm pretty sure the main hull is pretty well dry, so it should be pretty safe for getting back to it. There you go, you got your turret there. Now let's go back to the vehicle itself. We're going to focus mostly on the upper surfaces here. We're going to go back to some of our darks if we got some left here still. So I'm going to put some of that engine grime back out here. Looks like the sepia is still in good shape there. So again, we're going to get a little bit of darker stuff there. Maybe even a touch of it here. And you see how I tend to stop with the dark at these points where these other hatches and such come in. Now see, I can go in here, and now we've got some more shading going on in there. Here, let's get some around. Must be the... Well, can't say the driver's hatch because there's a hole mount in front of them, so I'm going to say this is the driver's hatch. Doing the same thing, so we throw a little bit of those darks on it. And, well, we got a couple of periscopes for them there too. How handy. So, you notice I'm pretty much restricting myself to one section here. I'm going to do some quick little continuation streaks down there. Let's go back to some of those lighter tones here. Get this where you can see it, and here we are. Now these rivets are a little bit finer than the ones on the turret for whatever reason. And I'll walk my way up to the turret, but not quite get to where the turret ring is. The brush is almost resting on its side here. Practically is right there. Turn this around, get a better grip on this, and sometimes just going in there with my fingers and just wiping it away. Just keep going here. We can even see the gray there. Let's take a little bit of the gray and the maiden flesh and make something that's a touch on the lighter side here. So see, we just changed the color again. Just made another modification. Sometimes we take some away. It's the advantage of the secret weapon paints, like I said. So I see here we just changed the color. It's way less yellow. It's way more towards the gray. We're not going to do that everywhere. I'm going to go back to more of a tan look over here. Like so. Again, this brush is practically on its side here. And then we can go hit these hatches here. Yep, okay. It's been a while since I've filmed a vehicle thing here, so it's, boy, when I was doing these very regularly, it was really easy for me to, okay, yeah, they can see this on camera. Oops, no, this is going to be in the way. Then it became just as difficult when I was doing the miniatures. See how this, we bring this out, it just, we're creating shadow by painting the light. If that makes any sense. Yeah, another periscope there. We're just gonna see, we're taking advantage of that little secondary wash that we just did there. And if it is getting too light, we can always tone that down. We've got a hinge here. See why I like to use the big old brush, because that just there. Just lets us move nice and quick. Nice and quick across the whole surface there. Again, hatch. Working our way around it, see, we just... And every so often, okay, we're going to change this up. We're going to get back to some of our more of our yellowish type color here. All the while thinking, okay, there's going to be that weathering, that chipping that happens here. There's going to be the dust. We can go with a couple of colors of dust too. It doesn't just have to be a one color of tan. We can make it maybe even a little bit darker in some spots. But thinking about making this hatch light enough so chipping's going to show up really nice, especially right around the opening of the hatch. And you also have to think, okay, those hatches tend to be flipped over and then they land really hard on some other metal surface of the tank, so that's gonna chip away some paint too. So it helps to do that. You think, okay, well, how is the tank going to get weathered? Where's the crew going to have to step? Where you have a hatch like this, what are they going to put their feet over here? They're going to be standing on that, on this, or whatever, to try and get some leverage on that hatch because, well, they're heavy. It's not going to be much of an armored thing. It's not like lifting up a car door, where you're mostly moving aluminum and plastic. Again, so I can wipe some of that away. Yeah, I'm just going to go on one side here. So we'll focus on this side, because once again, I try to keep these segments at no longer than, ideally no longer than 35 minutes. But sometimes just can't be avoided. That's not fill in that area, because that's, again, somewhere I want the dust to go. And if I want dust down in there to really show up, then I need to let it be light against dark, and that means that leaving the dark in place where I had it. I just have to avoid that temptation of trying to highlight the heck out of everything and highlighting it equally. Let's get a little difference between these. And again, I don't want to do this too much because, well, that's where I do want to have some chipping, but here I want to have some sun bleaching, so I just let this get a little bit lighter. See how much lighter that is. And you notice I just let that mix into some wet paint that was there. Just using my fingers, stippling that. I could use the sponges too if I wanted. Let's go in here. Again, doing some of that. I'm just letting the paint mix together here a little bit, do its own thing. Let's get back here and a couple of these surfaces here. Let's lighten up this one. I don't want to do too much because there is a vent around it. We can do there's some oil that we could put there, and I think, again, if we're going to do these with the acrylics, there is a secret weapon, oil, fresh oil discharge, all that kind of stuff. We can use that too if we want. And we'll just sweep that down there. Get a little hint of streaking like that. So I got one of these, I don't know, there's Pioneer tools in there, something like that. Here, and we still have our old mud that's out there. And now on our side plates here, side skirts, doing the same thing that we did before. See, we're getting the brush on its side, working my way down. But not necessarily making everything. Doesn't all have to be bright tan. Things can be, I'd say, there can be some soot on there too. Why not have some of that? See, I kind of like that being dark there, and I'll just leave it. Why wipe all that interesting stuff out? I'm just going to leave everything in the mud chutes alone. Gonna work along here. Not quite worried about rivets yet. Can do that in a little bit here. So I even like that staining effect. That happened because of using the engine grime. And you can see, well, it's doing its job. That's essentially what its purpose is for. So once again, we're doing that whole thing where we got the brush on its side. It ends up making that sharp point be a whole much wider, almost like a not a half inch wide, maybe a 3/8 inch wide brush, something like that. Carry some of this through. Now look at the difference here. So remember all this rough stuff we had, and it's gone now. We've already covered over that. No big deal. So on the top of our mud chutes here, like so. Just to get a little definition there. And we've got, again, a lot of hinges here and such. When the paint dries a little bit, I can start to go after some of these rivets. And what's the thing that I haven't even touched yet? I haven't even touched white. So that is something that's available to me for later, when I really need to make something light, say a rivet or something else, or if I wanted to have, geez, can you even see it on the Crusader? Yeah, you can see how the white on the insignia, well, those stand out because that's white, because I didn't use any white to highlight the vehicle at all. So you have these little clusters of rivets there. It's probably an area where dust is going to accumulate, I would say. And if you feel the need, okay, maybe you do a bit of, throw a few lights on some of those bogey wheel assemblies there. All the while thinking, I don't want to lose things that I was able to achieve in those initial glazes. So I always have to, I don't know, I guess you have to kind of stop yourself. And what we'll do is we'll, I'm going to a few of these rivets here. You don't need to see me endlessly highlighting rivets. So I'm going to get to the back of the vehicle here in a second, because that's one other major area we haven't really touched yet. And we're going to do that right now with this lighter color here, because I'm going to, again, want to break that up with some rust. And what are we doing? We're taking this and we're working. You notice how I work in a certain motion. When it's on that upper surface, I tend to do more scumbling. But on these vertical surfaces, we change that up. See, we're doing this vertical stroke like so. Here we go. On our door, we're lightening up that hatch. Door, actually more of a door than a hatch, because this is an APC after all. Go more towards the straight up tan. And this, it's much lighter than what we've had. But you have to figure this back here, this is gonna not just capture a lot of the weathering via chipping and stuff like that, but you've got exhaust pipes back here. Any kind of whatever dust and stuff trailed by the vehicle, it's all going to affect the zone back here. Let's hold it this way now. We can, these big old hinges here. This whole part of this plate here, that's going to fall down. Most likely fall down on the ground, so there should be a whole bunch of chipping and such that goes on there. There we are. Yeah, we won't affect that too much. So you can see the difference. This is what we started with here on the side. And what we have now. It didn't take much. Didn't take much to change how that looks. And yeah, I can lighten this up as much or as little as I want. But what we're going to do is we're going to repeat some of what you saw here onto the other side. And then what we'll do is we'll move on to, we'll do some other interesting effects. We're going to do some initial chipping of things. Maybe find some other highlights around it. So we'll get into that next. So we wanted to get into that chipping a little bit. And there's several ways to do it. Again, talked about the hairspray method, the MIG ammo chipping fluid. I think even Vallejo has a chipping fluid, all that kind of stuff. But I just can't do that on camera. At least not with this setup. Not with the airbrush and the noise and everything else. What we can do is the thing with the sponge. Now remember I talked about taking the sponge and just tearing off these pieces to create as much of an irregular surface as possible. I know it's really, there you go. Now you can see that a little bit. You'll see it much better when there's actually paint on it. And as far as paint goes, you got brown liner, We have sort of a red rust, that's secret weapon. Another secret weapon is the engine grime. Now, I know one thing that people do is, especially on the 40K side of things, they tend to make the chipping silver, which rolled steel and that sort of stuff used in armor really doesn't get shiny like that. So what we're doing, we're getting rid of some of that paint here. I'm gonna take away some. It's almost in a way like a dry brush, and then we position this on our corners here. And the lighter the touch, and the less paint that's on there. So I'll even take off some more paint here. But you see how that's just going to hit. Here, I'll do one right here. See that? That's a randomness that, believe me, is really hard to get by hand, because I used to try and paint these by hand. See how I'm going right along the edges here? The obvious place where those would be. And you can also see there's some reddishness to some of the chips there. Maybe you've gotten down to, say, some of the red oxide primer. So we're just going along those seams there, the ridge lines. Here on especially on our hatch and the cover, because these areas would really get a significant amount of beating there. I'm going to do some along the top here, because obviously people are going to be crawling across this to get into the turret. So this does not have to be the most complicated process in the world. I think I've seen people turn this into a real odyssey here. It just doesn't have to be. Whether this is bolt action vehicle, a 1/35 to 1/48 scale model, whatever, this is still a viable method here. Here I'm going to try and get this, boom, right there. This is one reason why I didn't paint the guns yet, because I figured, well, there's a good chance I might actually hit those. Here, let's get some of the bottom side of our turret here with the chips. So that's going to change that significantly. Now we can paint the undersides of those if you want. I know people do that. It tends to, it can have a positive effect. It can make those look more three-dimensional, but it can also make them look more painted on. We're trying to make these look as naturally occurring as possible here. And you notice I'm focusing on areas where I just think you'd have the most opportunities for tearing away some of that paint. I think you can really do that pretty well along your bottom surface here. So we'll just do a few there, see, and then we'll go over here, because this is one of those things that usually too much of a good thing ends up not being a great thing. Focusing more on the leading edges. The other thing it does is it tones down the rivets a little bit, because really, why would those rivets that are sticking up like that, why would they keep their nice paint on them? Wouldn't that be one of the first parts where paint gets rubbed off? Especially here on these dust and mud flaps. Obviously, we're going after those corners, but every so often I am going to go back in here, freshen up the paint, change the color. See, I'm going to get back to some red. You can see there's red, green, brown in there. I'm trying to make these as small as possible. I think when I was in the early days before I started to do the historical stuff, I tended to make really gargantuan paint chips, like somebody had sat there with a spatula and tried popping the paint right off of it in huge quantities. Then I realized, no, maybe not the best approach. So you see here, I just did a little too much right there. Bang, just wipe it away, hit it again with a little bit less. And now we're gonna work this on our doors here. Certainly on that edge. And what we might even do is change the shape of this a little bit. See, we've just changed the shape of that. Reduced it. Its profile just a bit so we can get some on the door. See, just didn't like what was on the handle there. Changed it around. Go back to my original shape here. Let's say, see, I even get these other little pieces here. Let's see what happens when I use one of these little guys here. It's hard to hang on to. Now there is another tool. It's from Green Stuff World, and it's actually designed to do this sort of thing. And there's a larger version and a smaller version. Just trying to keep this simple here. So see how that lets me get into small areas if I need to. I just want to get at this door and not everything else. Now I can go in there with the brush too. Let's say I want to maybe make some of these chips a little bigger. I can do that. The other nice side benefit of using stuff like the secret weapon and brown liner, or secret weapon chipping, or the brown liner and the secret weapon weathering paints. Sorry, it's late. Is that they dry really, really flat, as in really, really flat. See how I just accentuated some of that stuff around the turret ring? Because I'm thinking this is a prime area where guys are going to be stomping all over the tank here. Well, the APC, really not a tank. Should not make that mistake. Going against the edges here once again. Just trying to break up some of these large open areas here. You can see how that paint stays in there for a while. Again, if I do too much, remember I've got my dust still to go yet. Not much in the way of streaking. Not going to be doing that. Not a lot of rust here. It's not the plan. See, we'll just go here. Go along our bottom edge again. And one thing I can see all the different colors in here. Some of the gray, some of the brown, and having it dry flat like that. It's nice and dark too. Here we'll get a bit of the red and the brown liner going again. I'm going to hit the tops of these mud chutes. And that's really going to change. See how that changes that curve right there? Now we got this hatch. This will be tricky, trying to get everything in here. This is why I didn't go too crazy about getting that edge just perfect, because I knew that was going to happen there. Like so. Turn this around. We'll do a few on those, again, on those leading edges, trying to get those. And this is why I don't focus on, especially out here on these leading edges, like these toe rings there. Gotta get those. So the areas where things looked a little bit on the rough side in terms of blends, the reason those were left there is because they're supposed to play off of what I'm doing here with this chipping. supposed to work in conjunction with each other. We don't want to wipe out the overall shape of the vehicle. Now don't forget we still have to do some of our metal work there, and I think we'll actually do that next. Yeah, we'll go into our metals next before doing the insignia and the freehand and that sort of thing. So I see again here I'm trying to make it look like an area where they've walked up onto the surface. See, we're not doing the same thing everywhere. We're changing things up. So even here, maybe in the mud chutes, get a little bit of something there like it's comes through there and really abused that surface. Then I think what we'll do is, now we're going to try a few other little doodads here. I'm actually trying to get some of those rivets. Now we can, if we want here, let's get some brown liner back out there. Here, let's do a little bit of that. Let's get some of that. This is some of, there's red rust and there's old rust. I'm pretty sure that is the red rust. The old rust is pretty dark. It's a pretty dark red. So, like I said, we got our brush here, and if we want to accentuate some, we can. But even right away, these first few brush strokes, I can see that these chips that I'm painting on, they just instantly get artificially gigantic. That's not what I'm looking for. I think here, I'm going to give this a little bit of... so, I think I'm just going to go with a little bit of silver, a little bit of metallic on that, and then just hit it with some weathering powders to give it some black staining. Some real soot action, like it's got some scorch on it. I don't think I'm going to do the kind of scorching that I did on the Matilda. Now I'll be showing you that when it comes time for the freehand segment. I'll show you what I meant by that one. So let's get in here and see if we can't create a few. And I'm just going to darken that down too. Not sure that's actually really a window or not. See, if I want to, I can try and work around some of those rivets there too. And this is, like I said, you can spend as much or as little time on this phase as you want. It's up to you. I mean, I try not to get too involved with that weathering process. I try to do some, and then say, okay, that gets the point across. They can see it's there. I've seen some that are super, super weathered, and you know what? I've seen all kinds of... People say, "Well, tanks never get like that." Yeah, they do. No, they don't. Yeah, they do. To me, at this point, I've heard it so often, I kind of don't care. It's just becomes white noise to me, just background noise. Really don't care. It's what you want to do, and especially if say it's one of those 3D printed tanks or something like that just doesn't have a lot of resolution, or or even a resin saying the pieces didn't fit together that well. Well, that's why they invented battle damage. That's what that's there for. It's there to help you out and make your life a little bit easier. And this is where I can get in here, and now I can provide a little definition in between some of these shapes. So here, I just felt like the brush was going to be a better tool to do some of the stuff I wanted along this hatch here. So I'm going to darken this down. That's the other thing, too, that's nice if you've got a little bit of depth on your colors of this sort of stuff, where it maybe is got just that little touch of gray here, a little touch of more towards the red there. So maybe in one case it's all the way down to the primer, in another case it's all the way down to the steel. Or ceramite, or whatever the heck they call this stuff. It's been a while, so I don't necessarily remember. And yeah, this needs to be darkened down here with a little bit of scorching. Now this one I may do some of that heat type stuff, and I've got some examples of it. Got some examples that I've got on the Matilda, and I'll take you to that blog post and show you some of that in our next segment. And I think we're just about ready for that. Like I said, don't want to take that too far. You get to the point across. You don't have to smack him in the face multiple times. So there we have it. And now we're going to move on to some of those, just a few of the metal effects on some of the guns and on the tracks. Here we've got something that's proven to be really, really handy for so many different things, and even on vehicles too. And this is from Vallejo. It's metal medium. We're also going to use some of these right here. So we've got this from Secret Weapon. You see me use the verdigris blue. I'm going to use that in place of the blue heat. Now it's got the purple heat and orange heat. Now somewhere, yeah, I've got the blue heat color. Don't know where it is. We're just going to use the verdigris blue. It's not quite the same, but it's going to function the way we need. Now I'm going to take you to over here. So see the Matilda there, and you can see on that gun barrel. Now we got that sort of the chrome look there. And again, I know this is sort of a artificial type thing here, but it's a fake universe anyway. So see how you got that blue that goes to the magenta to the orange. We're going to try some of that. And you can also see a preview of some of our markings that we're going to throw on this vehicle. So let's get down to that. We're going to throw our metal medium down first. Put that right there, and you can see how thick that is and see how bright it is. I'm going to make the palette camera a little bit bigger. And we're also going to take some of our brown liner here. We're going to set it next to it, because we don't necessarily want to use that just as it is. And watch what happens now as we mix these two together. So I think you can see that pretty well. Watch what happens. Look at what we just created. We just created a really, really dark metallic paint. We'll mix a little more in there. So the more the metal medium you put in there, the lighter it's going to be. Where are we going to play with this first? Yeah, let's just play with it on some of the treads here. So we're going to shrink our palette camera back down again. Get that out of the way. And this is a little bit more of a dry brush. But see how that makes a nice dark metallic effect on that. Really dark. If I had used the blue liner, it would have given me sort of a gunmetal gray thing. Look at what it's doing here. See how that it's not super obtrusive there, not real noticeable. It's really dark, but it has here. You can see instantly, but it still has the shinier look of metal. And now here, this is a different. You say, well, wait a second. Why are you saying don't do this effect on the chipping part over here? Well, that's because you have a different type of. This is not armor plate here that we're talking about on these treads, even though they would often strap the spare tracks on the vehicles to give them a little extra armor. Of course, once they got shot away, there wasn't a whole lot of extra armor. But anything's better than nothing. At one point, Soviet tanks resorted to putting bed springs on their vehicles because it seemed to help with shaped charges like Panzerfausts. Didn't necessarily do that. See, now if I add a little more of the... See, I'm spreading that out. Look at how that's lighter now. And here, let's find ourselves a few spots that we can just ever so gently brush that over. Because this stuff is being ground against whatever kind of surface. It's almost like it's being polished, like rocks in a rock polisher. Here, let's turn this around, get this going the right way. So you can see it does not take long. It doesn't take long to get a really nifty effect. And what are we doing? We're playing off of the earlier effect that we did with what's tantamount to the tracks rust. And that just about takes care of it. I don't want to go too far. It's a whole lot easier doing that than to say after the fact, try to get in there and do all those washes like we did before. So here, let's get down in here. And we're going to do the same thing. We've got that brush feathered out real nice. And we'll just go over the top here. Maybe we will do the scorching on this. We'll see. That's how things go. Sometimes it's just I have to see how it's looking. And sometimes I can tell right away, yeah, that's not working. No, actually here, I think I'm just going to go with the soot. Yeah. Because, well, that way I can also show you some of the weathering powders too. That's my goal with these different videos, is to equip you with as many different methods as possible, not just, okay, here's the one that you're always going to use all the time. That's not going to be helpful because you will probably find yourself in situations where, yeah, that's not really going to work in this situation. So anyhow, we're still using the darker stuff here. And you'll be able to see the different here. Let's make it even a little darker. It's amazing how much you can lighten this. What was the old GW metal? Mithril silver, something like that. That's about what, when you go straight up metal medium, that's what you're looking at. It's almost that bright. So yeah, I'm actually going to throw some of this on there, because remember, if we want to do the scorch thing, we need to work in conjunction with these metals here. So we're just about ready on that. And we've got one last go around here. Although I am gonna just remind myself, get some shininess onto that light there. Now, I don't know if that's a spotlight or if it's an infrared or whatever. Who knows? It's kind of a pretend APC. So, you know what? I'm just going to go over the whole thing with the metal medium and we'll go from there. And maybe here I will blast a little bit of the non-metallic stuff off. So see, that really creates a difference there now. Now we can start to work it lighter. Now I can see that getting significantly lighter. On camera that may not show up quite so much. But boy, it does make a difference. The other thing I will say about the metal medium, doesn't dry super fast. It's not like oil paints or something. But it's not going to dry quite so fast. So, and remember it's thick because it has all the little mica flakes in there. So I got that nice and shiny now. Here, let's get back to the main hull of the vehicle. I'm going to hit our hull mount. Heavy flamer here, it would seem, and we're just gonna go over our exhaust tubes here. Remembering, I'm gonna even a little bit lighter here. Let's go another level up so you can see just how intense that can be. Like so. And here. And we'll get those. Sorry if that was off camera. It's kind of a large object getting under there. So we got that going here. Let's go one level lighter on our oh yeah, that's making a difference. I think. Now you can see it. Huge difference there. Unfortunately, it's a tough angle for me to paint at, so I have to change it back, sorry. But at least you can see, get a little quick peek at how different that is, how light that is. One last go around here. We'll let this set for just a second as we... Good enough. So we've got that, the metal, and so we have a little bit of that left out there, and this is something I noticed that's helpful. So we'll start out with the blue. This is the verdigris blue. Again, if I had the blue heat, that would be ideal, but one of the reasons it's going to work is because, well, we're mixing it with our metal medium here, so still going to have a metallic look. Now let's go back to our other scene here, and because you see that it's not just blue, it's a metallic blue. And as you saw, well, turning colors into metal, that's what this stuff does real well. This way it still looks shiny, but altered. I'll do some of that here. And I had to go over a little bit because, well, obviously I need to be able to blend the purple in with this. Let's get to our flamer here. There we go. And like I said, we'll go over that just a smidge. Technical term there. Okay, well, maybe we'll throw a bit of that here. We'll see how subtle we can make it. This will be an experiment, be a live experiment on air. Worst comes to worst, you don't like it, you just paint the soot right over it with some weathering powders. Yeah, it won't be a big deal. And that is, it's good enough there. Now purple heat, and you'll see the difference here because this is going to be a bit more transparent. This actually works pretty well. See how transparent that is? It works pretty well with the fluorescent paints because the fluorescent paints are already, they're also super translucent. See how we're mixing the two together, but it stays metallic. It's a light effect. It's not real dark. Because all this is, you've got the metal that has just been changed a little bit, altered. We don't want to get too, I want it to look like it's purple metal. We just want to say, oh, hey, man, something's happened here. It's like those chrome exhaust pipes. And this is why we let that hint of blue stay there because we're mixing the purple with that. So yeah, what the heck? It's like I said, I'm probably going to go with the soot over the top of this, the weathering powders, and that'll tone it down quite a bit. But hey, it's neat. It's here. Let's get our purple now on your main turret right here. And like I did with the blue, I have to extend the purple out a little bit so that I can mix the orange with it. And remember, I can always, if I feel like it's not metallic looking enough, I could always take the metal medium and just maybe even lightly glaze it over the top of that. Let's see, we set this all up first by using the metal medium. I think now you get a better peek at that side. I just have to hold it at this angle for me to be able to paint it. That's just kind of how it is. And I'm going to throw some of that on its kind of a pearlescent now effect on the lens. So we've got our purple down. What's left? Orange heat. I do suggest you mix these up pretty thoroughly. That is something you're going to want. It's not like it separates badly, but it's a translucent thing, and sometimes those translucent paints, they will separate a bit. I'm going to get that metal medium back out here. Don't want to lose sight of that. Yeah, I may even take a touch of that magenta in there too. Remember, the whole idea of this is orange metal, not orange. So in here, yeah, it gets too light. Again, I can always see. I'm gonna throw a little more metal in there. It's weird. It looks dark. It looks dark on the palette, and then I get it here, and then it looks really light. I think that's at a decent angle for you to see. And it's okay if this is subtle and it's not just bash them in the face obvious. It's just like our chipping stuff. You don't necessarily want people to go, hey, look at all the chipping. Ain't that great? You just want people to look at and say, oh, it's got desert scheme to, oh yeah, look at there's some stuff worn away on that. So now we've got, yeah, you can see that pretty well. Let's see if we can't do that same effect on these remaining areas here. All right. Now, one thing I will advise too, like the fluorescent paints, this has that thickness to it, so you have to be careful not to let that thickness show too much. And what I mean is, it's kind of shiny and sparkly. If there's unevenness in the paint when you apply it, it's gonna be sort of obvious. People will be able to see that and say, oh, what's going on there? So you wanna, I see, you thin it down, you'll have some issues. So you got to balance between thinning it down to make sure it's not blotchy as far as thickness goes, but not thinning it down too much so that it gets blotchy as far as your application, your color goes. You want that to be a smooth deal, more like it's almost been airbrushed on. So see, now we've got a whole sort of spectral effect going on there. So that's neat. I'm glad I did that. It offers a nice texture difference here. I'm just so used to heavily rusted because basically the paint has been cooked off of there. So I'm so used to doing that. It's a fantasy vehicle, so why not screw around? Sci-fi thing, why not go sci-fi? Because none of this stuff is real. Sorry, they are just toys. That's all they are. Hate to break it to people. Oh yeah, wow. That purple and stuff there, ooh, that is... Yeah, I just set this down here. Wow, that really shows up actually way more than it did on the Matildas. It's the exact same thing, didn't do anything different. It's just, I think because of the purples and the blues, it's gonna it shows up more on this desert vehicle. Alright, so that's pretty nifty. Yeah, you can actually see it almost better from far away. So what we're gonna do next, now that this is done, we're gonna get in with some of the freehand insignia like you saw on the other Matilda. So we'll be right back. So we're going to have some fun with some insignia and some markings. Now they're not going to be exactly like our Matilda here. They'll be slightly altered. I may still go with the V because it's just a little something I made for, well, Victoria Miniatures. But see, we got that number there on the side of the turret. We'll go with something like that. And we'll see if we got that little diamond shape there. We'll do something like that. And we're also going to try and make the headlights a little bit more like that too. So let's go back to our original scene. But I also, see, I like these other markings here. So we're going to start out here. I just got some bluish white. It's Reaper Maggot white. It's this right here. So that's going to be our white. And what we're going to do is get ourselves a numeral on this vehicle here somewhere. Let's pop that maybe right here. And you can see we're giving it that stenciled look. You can draw this out on a piece of paper if you want ahead of time. You can draw it out with a pencil ahead of time. Me, I just like to go for it and do it. So here's our stenciled 50 on there. There's a few other places, obviously, we could probably put that. Maybe here on the back. This is a good spot for it. Let's get that centered up where you can see it. And you can see what I'm going to do also. I need to see just how big this is going to be. because there's nothing like running out of space. So see, I'm just ghosting in. The other thing too is that, well, we're probably going to want to rip some of this away. And by that, I just mean taking a little bit of our sand color and going over the top. Now, I know one of the things that vehicle crews had a tendency to do was take mud, dust, whatever, and work off some of those markings because, well, you work so hard to get camouflage and do all this other sort of stuff, and now you got these bright numerals and insignias all over the place that say, shoot me here. So that is something that we're going to do to these also. That's why the final weathering sort of happens after this. Now you could use decals if you want to. If you've got them, apparently GW is making a bunch of decals and stuff, but, well, I kind of like the idea of using my own. And what am I going to do? I like the idea of having the three here. I'm going to do, this is going to have the red on either side and the white in the middle. So I'm going to do that right here. I was thinking of doing it down the whole side of this thing, but that's kind of a World War I era type marking. We don't want to go with that. So let's see, can we bring this over? We can bring that over to this side. And there we go. And you can see I've watered it down so it's not 100% pure. Well, it's not pure white anyways, for starters. So, gotta think of that. Okay. So there's those markings there. What else do we want to try and do? We've got the one numeral there. What I'm going to do now is get some of the red going here. Like so. And we'll do the triangle shape here. That's about centered for you. Gonna make it a decent size. And I think I'm gonna still put that yellow C in the interior. And you notice I'm rotating this around because, I believe, I was terrible at geometry, but I believe this is an isosceles triangle we're trying to create. With the British vehicle markings, let's see, you had the square, the circle, the triangle, and I believe even the diamond. So the shape, basically it would give you the breakdown of the unit. So you would have the color, the first shape, then color, and then there would be a number inside, and that could indicate, I believe, the number inside the triangle or the shape would indicate which vehicle it was. I forget if it was the color, told you what platoon it was. So that's good right there. And let's see if we can get one more of these. We may just drop one here. And I'm thinking all the while we want this to be an even triangle. You can draw them out if you want. You can use a ruler if you want. What the heck? I obviously am not going to do that. And we're going to apply the red. One of the reasons I like the clear red in this instance is that I can still actually see the vehicle color underneath it. That's why I'm not trying to apply it perfectly even. So see, now we've got ourselves, like the Crusader, we have a nifty little distinct marking that we can weather and do some fun things too. Here we are. So we won't do necessarily everything. So I'm not going to go, there's some other markings I'm going to put on here, and I'll just do one each instead of doing all of them because, well, don't want this to end up being a 5-hour long video. Now, I don't mind. I'm still working on it, but I just don't know if you have the time, and oh my goodness, it would take forever to upload. So we've got these two nifty markings there. What were some of the other things I wanted to put here and here? What the heck? What we're going to do is on this side, so instead of the kangaroo, we'll substitute a skull in there. So we're going to try and make ourselves a square here. Like I said, you can measure this out if you want. And like I said, I'm just going to do these front two here. I might do some on the back, like on the Crusader. But I just want you to see what it is we're trying to do here. So you can sort of mimic real life somewhat. Now let's go back to, I want to look at my thing. So it's red on the top. So I just needed to look at my own insignia there. So here's this. Sort of a chevron type thing. Good enough. Like that, even a little bigger. Like so. Why not? And I'm going to rotate this around, just make sure that it's relatively square. Then I'm going to get back to my blue here. I'll go with my verdigris blue because I'm pretty sure that's what I used on that first logo on the other vehicle. So this was another sort of marking system. Depending on what this was, the color combinations, it could be infantry, it could be artillery, it could be mobile artillery. Just each one signified a different unit. And I'm not going to do a dissertation on that. I sort of had it semi-memorized at one point, and then, well, it's not memorized anymore. There we go. That's good enough. Because remember, we said we wanted to do some chipping on that. Now I get some of that out of the brush. I want to turn this thing pink. So, just like we've got on the other vehicle, let's see if we can get a circle in the square. Like you do. There. I'm going to get it closer to the edge, maybe. I know for some of you this is going to drive you nuts because there's no guides here. We're just doing it all by eye. Good enough there. We got some of our yellow here. And we're going to put that V in there. So I'm going to take a little bit of white, throw it in there. Well, maggot white. Get this lined up where you can see it. And there's our V. So see, we've sketched that in. I'm going to put our serifs on there, because I know we had those. And then I'm going to widen one side of that, so it makes it more of a Roman font. So serifs again. Carry that down. Carry the V. There you go. That's pretty well dry on the other side. Here, let's see, by holding this upside down, I can see, okay, that's not a circle. Because I know, what is it? People say I can't even draw a circle or whatever. This is how I used to draw circles when I was a kid. I would just turn the paper around. Poof. Like so. see if we can't throw ourselves a little bit of a skull type thing on here. Let's get rid of some of the excess. Now that's going to be a little bit of a brighter red because we got white underneath it, so I'm going to have to dirty that up a touch. And we can do that. We've got the blue here. Let's take a touch of yellow, and that's going to dirty it up a little bit. There we go. Doesn't matter if it's a little uneven. I'm going to work out here, even up a few little things. And we'll go back to our white again here. Need to get some eyes on that skull. And in no time at all, got yourself some markings. Now we wanted to do the yellow C, maybe it's a... Actually, I'm going to go with an I in here, so C is command for the Matilda tank, and we'll just go I. And just say I for infantry. Why not? It's an APC. Like so. And that's nifty. Now, I can put other markings on here. Like I said, we can put some kind of caution stripes on this. Whoa, what the heck? Let's go crazy. Again, dirty this up just a touch. What do we got? Here we go. Just like that. And I'm going to make it irregular. See, like some of it's already been scraped away. Like that. Then I can just grab, I think I've got some black here. Let's throw out some black. Because I can use this on a few other areas here too, where I'm going to use the soot and stuff like that. So I'm going to take some of that away. Because hey, everybody loves caution stripes. And what we want to do is try to get some of these planned out here. Can always go back and forth. Take away, add, whatever. And let's paint these in, see what we come up with. Again, if we don't like them, we can always just ditch them, cover them back up again. And even now, I'm adjusting these on the fly. Say, oh my god, it's a horrible mess, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then we go back in here and we just clean it up. Doesn't have to be absolutely spot on the very first time. We can go back in and adjust that. Hold it upside down again, and what that does, it gives you a different perspective on it. And like I said before, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change some things up. Weather those. Get some darker color on that. And what I am going to do, just to be different here, now I'm going to take this blue. Let's have some fun. Right here. Actually, no. Just going to wipe that away. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to add a few of these. So there's one. This is something I used to do all the time on 40K vehicles. So I'm going to do that, let that dry. Can you hear how heavy that freaking thing is? And I'm going to do another one over here. See what the heck is going on there. See in a second. So as that dries, remember I got my black out here. This is a little bit of the kind of a, what is that, the little bit of text right here, the inscriptions kind of sound just kind of, it's a phrase, we called it Greeking that in. So I'm just making it look like it's individual letters, trying to keep the line straight. So this makes it even a little bit more of a 40K sci-fi whatever type of thing here. Gonna do the same thing over here. The little prayers, whatever, sigils, whatever you want to call them. This is why I wasn't really worried about the blue smear right there, because I'm just writing right over the top of it. Now, this is the fun little bit here. Let's get some of that white on there. Actually, I'm going to grab this. There's still a little bit of wet paint there. And we outline that just ever so slightly, not super heavy. And we'll put a T in there because that's one of the A and T, and I think S are some of the most common initial letters. So say we got ourselves a little, looks a little bit like an illustrated manuscript type thing going on there. Where's my, it's on the back over here. And we'll do the same thing back here, only we can put a different letter. See, just threw a little A in there. That dresses that up a little bit. See, we've got what was a very plain surface now has a bunch of things, and if we put these things back here, really juices that up a lot. I'm going to do that off camera now because you saw it once. You don't need to watch me do the same ones again. And then we'll weather those up in the final weathering. We'll get the powders and the other stuff out here. So that may be a two-step process. The final weathering, we'll see. So just stay tuned for those last couple final exciting steps. We're in the last major phase. We're in the home stretch. We're in the final weathering. Got a whole bunch of weathering powders out here. Got a bunch from Secret Weapon. And you can see we've got all kinds of different yellow type colors. We've even got a little rust. We may sneak that into some of the tracks there, but see plenty of yellows. I also enjoy to make ammo pigments too, and we just got a black and an earth tone. The black obviously for some of the scorching effects on our here and the exhaust, that sort of thing. So we've got ourselves some sponges, we've got some brushes. Also have Secret Weapon and Megan will both have their pigment fixers. We'll see just how much we use this. I tend to shy away from it a little bit. We'll experiment with it. We'll see. We've even got this. This is something I've actually used for tracks also. It's nice to have just a bunch of different things handy. So that's still where the palette camera is. What I'm going to do here is see if I can't get some of these colors out on the palette. And that looks, yeah, it's a really nice one. Is that the yellow earth? That's a nice one there. We've got the Russian earth. We'll try and put that next to it over here. And it's best to just put out a little bit and then put up more as you need it. And I will say this too. These weathering powders, when they get into things, if they land on your carpet, they could be there a while, as in like forever. I've had that happen too. So I'm just speaking from experience. There's a little lighter. I probably won't even use a third of that. And let's see, I think we've got the dark yellow. No, that's the yellow earth we put out there. Here, let's get this dark earth out here. It has a little reddishness to it. I like to have some options. See, that almost can be, to me, that's actually the rust color that I like a little bit more. This clay brown, again, that's interesting. We'll throw some of that out there too. And let's see what the dark yellow is going to do. Now, you could wear a mask too when you're doing this. It's, for me, I can't wear a mask and have you hear me. So now let's, just for the heck of it, let's get some of the Pigment Fixer out. Now, you can also use rubbing alcohol too. Now, let's get the Pigment Fixer out here, and we'll toss it into a little container here, just so we got it. Alright, so that's going to be our Pigment Fixer there. Let's go with, let's get some of the black soot out here. Bang, there we go. You can mix these together too. You don't have to just say, okay, oh my gosh, I don't have the color that I need. Now you can mix these together. I do it all the time. Now, what I'm going to do, I get actually a different brush out here. That's good enough. Because I just wanted to show you what happens. Look at what happens here. So see, I can actually paint with this stuff. Yeah. Now, it's darker there. It's not going to dry dark like that. It's going to dry lighter. Basically the same color it started out as. Now, when it dries, that's going to be permanently fixed. As opposed to, say, something like rubbing alcohol, when you use that, you can still wipe that away. And I've done that in previous videos, but I just want to, let's do the easy thing first. Let's get some of this black soot here. Throw this onto our, right here. So this does a couple of things. It's not just making it darker. One of the reasons I wanted to use the powders is because it creates a different texture. See how soft that is by its nature. So that's really nifty. So it doesn't just make it dark, it also makes it just super flat, super matte. We want that for sure. Remember, we wanted to do it on these things too. Now you can, I don't know if you can see the dust sort of floating up into the air. That's why, well, maybe a mask might be for you. Now let's try something here. Let's get a little bit of this Pigment Fixer, mix it into the black. Now I'm going to shrink this palette down. There we go. Now it looks really, really dark here. Just keep in mind it's not going to dry that way. But what it is going to be is permanent. So what's there is there. That is not coming off. The other stuff, you could still work that away. Let's see, even with the Pigment Fixer, I can still get somewhat of a soft effect here. So there's our, that's two different methods of doing it. And when it dries, it's going to dry. It's going to dry matte. So here we're going to go back to our Pigment Fixer just to get our black there. And now a little less Pigment Fixer. We're going to extend some of the black squishing there. Doing that right over. By not completely wiping away our blue heat. Don't want to do that. See, now we've got ourselves some nice scorching on that. Let's grab a few of our colors here. Let's just see what we get. And this is that Russian earth. Now for me, if this is me doing it, I'm doing more of a sandy color, but again, we do, when this is for someone else, you have to kind of do what's requested. That's kind of how it goes. So let's find ourselves a reasonably soft brush for this. What I'll do is I'm going to hit this with a spray varnish. You can see this is how I'm going to get some of the final streaking here. See, I can do some nice, soft, subtle thing. I'm kind of stippling that in. That's the nifty thing you can do with the powders here. We can put some of our black over this. Get another vent over here. And let's go back with our black here again. And go back with some of my brown here. And it lets me make some of these soft, subtle transitions. I can darken some things down a bit, so let's get a little bit of dust down in there. I'm not doing the mud shoots yet. I'm kind of saving that. So see, here's where we can do a little bit of, just drag that down to subtle hint at some streaking here. See, I can go over the, see, this has a little bit of our liquid in there. So we're changing the effect of our powder, and it's Pigment Fixer, so it's going to be permanent. So there we go. There's so many different ways you can approach this. Let's get a little bit of this clay color on here. Remember, we were talking about the different ways of weathering the vehicle, and we talked about that pinker color. Well, let's throw some of that out here in the form of some of these powders. So I can take the darker powder here, and look at that. See, just a little bit over that. Just tone that down. Took it down just a bit. See how that's very brilliant white. I'm going to do the same thing over here and just knock it down a bit. We've got our icons here. See how we knock those down a touch. Even take a little bit of the black here, maybe. Can even take some of the lighter color. I'm not worried, not doing the tracks just yet. We're finding some other areas here. Even mixing that together with some of our clay brown. So that can mix the Russian earth and the sand together. Make a different color. So it's almost like I'm painting with it. Right. Now let's get some more of our black on our exhaust there. Because you don't necessarily have to think of this phase is only making something darker. You can actually lighten it too. Some of these, it's weird. It's like paint in a way. Some of it's more opaque than others. It's really weird how that works. But the nifty thing is in the areas where you don't have the Pigment Fixer, you can wipe it away if you don't like it. So let's see if we can't. Here, let's do a little bit of dust here on this turret. A little more dust here on the cupola and the hatch. Just finding a few places where I can put a little bit of that lighter dust on there. Streak that down. And get rid of some of it. Maybe we can have some of that accumulate in here. Can have some of that accumulate in here. And let's say we have a couple of different sponges. We can come in here. See, that's wiping some of it away. So, we've got some dust settled down into the crevices there. So that's doing some nifty things. And like anything else with Weathermead, just you don't want to go too far with it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab some of that Pigment Fixer. Take some of this here. Now the other thing you can do is where you have just the dust sitting there, you can put a little drop of Pigment Fixer over the top. I'm going to make this a touch lighter. See, it's almost like a little bit of a goopy type mix here. What I'm going to do is go in here. You have to remember that it's sort of changed colors. It's going to dry lighter. Always got to keep that in mind. Okay. Got our dust sort of working in there, and the other thing I can even do is see if I can get another brush in here and just sort of dust that on. I think one of my bigger number 10 rounds here. Let's see if I can't. I've got some of these here. See if I can just drop some of this in there. Go back to my original color here. And basically the Pigment Fixer sort of acts as a glue. And make sure I don't have too much of that junk on my glove. Now I'll trail some of this down here. And as that dries and lightens, it will still have a little bit of texture in there, not a ton. Not an inordinate amount of texture, but we'll have some. And so you'll get a little bit of dust in there. Not doing the tracks just yet because, well, it's going to be really tough to hang on to it at that rate. Once we do that, I'm going to get a little bit of dust down in the inner portion of the tracks there. I'm going to spin this around. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. So let's get a little more of the Pigment Fixer. Again, we'll make kind of a slurry right here. I think you can still see it on the palette camera. Like so. And that's still on camera. Get this going in here. Some more. Like that. Here's our next batch. Alright, so we got that. And here, let's put this here so that it doesn't want to tip over the other way. That would not be good. Got our brush here. Now I'm going to get some of the yellow earth back out here. Like that. And let's drop some down in there, like we did before. And the idea is that it's going to dry the right color. But the idea is to get ourselves just a little bit of, take this glove off. I'm going to put a new, see if I can find a new glove in a second here. Just while we've got this working. See how that's streaking down just a touch. So we've got ourselves in just ever so slightly. Now let's see. And that's already starting to lighten up as it dries. And I'm going to get some of my lighter tone in here. Now it can get a little messy. I will not deny that. It can get a lot messy. In fact, these are just the things you need to be aware of. So see what the liquid does, it just lets me get down in here. Powder sometimes is a little bit resistant. Went all the way down in those little crevices like so. Turn this around. Again, I don't know if you can see it, that's kind of slipped off of out of view of the camera. But again, timing is everything here, because things will dry. And sometimes I have to, yeah. See how that just lets me get that down in there. Here's that, lets me maybe clump that a little bit. Now we're talking about tracks. Let's go get some of our yellow earth back out here. And like I said, all of this palette paper, I'm just gonna chuck this in the garbage because there's just dust all over the place. It's kind of how it goes. So we got our soft, big old brush here. And we'll dust that into our tracks. I don't want to completely wipe out what we've done with the metals. Don't want to wipe that all out. And I'm not doing mud spatters. Again, that whole back panel there, that would be in a typical vehicle, we'd already be talking about the spatters on it, and we're not doing that. See how we're just dusting this over? It's almost, well, yeah, it really puts the dry and dry brush. So a little more here. And then we'll dust up bottom of the vehicle here. And like I said, hitting that with our spray, that'll really do the job. So we'll do a little more here, and we're gonna get some up in our tracks here. So there's our dust effects. You can see that's starting to dry, starting to lighten up. I can throw a little more in here now because it's starting to dry. Spin this around. We'll do a similar thing over here. But I want to make sure that I want this to adhere via the Pigment Fixer. I want to make sure there's Pigment Fixer on it. Just like I did up in here. See, I'm taking advantage of the Pigment Fixer, throwing in some crumbly bits here. Spin this around. Letting a little bit of that brown, clay brown mix in there. One way to clean this stuff up, the one thing we found that works pretty well is actually rubbing alcohol. That does not do a bad job cleaning this stuff up. Certainly what I'll be using on all my brushes to clean those off. So we've got variations. We've got steel showing that's worn down. Now again, you could take rubbing alcohol and one of these and see how that's wiping that stuff off. See how we can get some of it back. Then we can do that here. If we feel there's too much. If either we're wiping out too much of the metal, you can do that. See how that's gotten down inside those seams there, so we have a dark over light. Same thing with these couple of rivets here. That's the effect I was looking for. So hopefully this is giving you a few things, food for thought, that sort of deal. And what we'll do is we'll do a final thoughts thing and maybe do that spotlight there on the, it's mounted on the side of the turret. So there we have it. We'll just sort of let that dry. Now some pigment fixers just take longer to dry than others. I think the secret weapon one dries a little faster. I'm used to the rubbing alcohol, which dries really quick. Here, I'm going to get some of that clay brown in there. Just to switch it up a little bit. And again, if I see something, okay, there's just too much there, then I can take some of that and just wipe some of it away. Just make some of that disappear. Or maybe there's too much. I realize that's not in perfect focus. That's better. This one, I'm just going to sort of take some of that away. Alright. So we'll be back with the last little thing that we're going to do. And that's this little dude right here. So on that little segment, here's some final thoughts as we do this. So one last effect that we're going to do, it's going to be that little light right here on this. And this is from Reaper. This is Pearl White. Actually got a few other demos using this. It's an interesting thing. It's not like the metallic. You can see it is white. But I mix it with this and it really does give it a pearlescent look, not a metallic look. So we're going to mix this together and let's see what we get here. Because I know usually these kind of things are painted more like gemstones or whatever. That's fine. But they, in a way, they were more like this, more basically a pearl type look to them. So you can see we're trying to do a little bit of light to dark because we're using some of our original color there. Now let's see what happens when we go with even more of the pearl white. And just like all these other mediums, this one dries a lot faster, even though it is relatively heavy. And what I'm actually doing is putting some texture on there because when you want, like when your headlight, when you look at the interior structure of it, you can see it's more like a lighthouse where you've got these refracting lenses inside of it. So that's what we're trying to impart here a little bit. So now let's go the opposite way. Still going to get some of this pearl stuff here, but we're trying to darken it down. That's a little bit of that secret weapon gray. So when you add the pearl stuff, it's going to lighten it. Got to be aware of that. I'm just trying to make sure, yeah, we need to get a nice rounded shape in there. I'll hit this vision slit here too. So let's go see if we can't get even more straight up pearl white here in some places. Now it's going to be tough to see. Now, it won't be the easiest thing to spot. But remember, the headlights are sort of on the grayer side, so we're going with more. But I got this sort of seafoam type blue out here. There. Alright, let's get back to more of this. And then what I can do is wait for that to just dry a little bit, and then I can go over it with some like Secret Weapon water effects. And that will give it the extra little bit of gloss that it needs. This gives it the pearl look. The other thing gives it more of a shiny look. Now while we wait for that to dry, speaking of white, let's go out here and throw some regular white. Because we have not done... Again, I'm waiting for things to dry, so let's see just how light we can highlight some of these rivets before they get too noticeable. Let's make sure this is in focus for you. That's better. There's just a couple of, see, like those rivets there. Now where you've got some of your weathering powders, that can make it a little bit tough to get the paint to, not necessarily just to stick there, but it won't apply quite so easily. See, just hitting a few of these, not every single one. It's just like with the chipping, when I wanted it everywhere. I also don't want to bring up every single one of these little, well, these are not so little. That's why I'm going back into these, because they're actually kind of on the substantial side. And I'm throwing a few highlights on a few other spots here too. And it's giving us one little extra layer of dimension here. We're always looking for that. See how I left that still be a little bit on the rough side. Still not doing every single rivet. Now, remember we talked about the painting these undersides of these chips. You can do that if you want. And I decided to sort of refrain from that. It's something I used to do all the time. I just don't really do that anymore. Not quite sure. I guess once I started to do more of the historical stuff, I did that less. At some point, I do want to try, not the hairspray method. I've got plenty of the, like I said, plenty of chipping medium around here, both Vallejo and make ammo. So eventually I want to give that a shot. I even have a vehicle that's all set up for it. Now it is a historical vehicle. So here, So the turret, it's one place where maybe you want to put some extra focus on. Now, Victoria does have poses that work well as tank commanders, because you have the whole torso, legs, everything is separate, arms. You can even have tank riders, because she does also, I believe. Now, it might only be the Highland Moss Guard, I'm not sure. But I know I used some of those as tank riders. So I think we're just going in here, finding a few little places to add some final details. And now at this point that is dry. And I'm going to locate some Here we go. Secret weapon water effects. Realistic water, sorry. When it says do not shake, we do not want to shake. Now, had this been... Here, let's get a little bit of this out here. We do not need very much. In fact, I'm just going to brush that out there. If we were going to do mud and spatters and all this kind of stuff, we could have used this and those weathering powders to make some of that mud. So all I'm doing, it's pretty simple. Just over the top, and it gives it a nice glossy look, and we'll give it some little extra highlights there. It's nothing fancy. Nothing fancy. So we'll just do a couple more of these guys and call this done. So this is, at the time of this painting, it is still an unnamed vehicle, but like I said, the most likely name at this point seems to be the Kangaroo APC. It's from Victoria Miniatures. You can check out her site. I've got plenty of links to her site on my blog, post articles. So there's plenty of stuff for you to check out. Thanks again for watching. For the patrons, I really appreciate the support. It means a lot. It means I can do stuff like this. Otherwise, it would be really, really difficult to do that. And if you're seeing this at a certain point, you can, for as little as $5, see plenty of tutorials. But the $15 Army Painter pledge, which just scrolled across the bottom of the screen, that is also... That not only does it let you see all the army painting videos, it lets you see everything. You get to see everything that's made during the month, especially special things like this. So that turret, pretty nifty there, and you can see that that's been slowly drying. So we're gonna let that dry completely, and we'll get you some pictures. Obviously, I'll have a nice blog post on this where you can really see a lot of these little tiny things. Many more pictures. So there you have it. There's your vehicle. We'll get the turret on there for you in the final photos. And we'll catch you on the next one.